you. Welcome and thank you once again for joining us in today's webinar titled Innovative New Approaches to Combat Malaria, organized by GBC Health Corporate Alliance on Malaria in Africa, CAMA. My name is Ochuko Keyamu Onyige. I'm the Nigerian country manager for GBC Health CAMA, and I'll be your moderator for today's presentation. As a quick introduction, the Corporate Alliance on Malaria in Africa is a GBC Health-led initiative to drive partnerships for malaria control and elimination. The Alliance is a unique coalition of companies from various industries, all with business interests in Africa. CAMA's work centers on the development of corporate, workplace, and community malaria programs. We focus on building in-country level capacity by identifying needs and gaps in country and mobilizing businesses' contribution to fill them. We foster partnerships, multi-sectoral partnerships to increase the scale and impact of malaria control initiatives. We create evidence-based tools to help companies develop and manage workplace and community malaria programs. We provide advisory services to companies that want to start malaria programs and those that want to try to see how they can scale up what they're currently doing. And we also provide platforms for exchange of knowledge and best practices, just like the one we're having right now. And we have organized leadership events to bring stakeholders together to talk about the issues we're facing in malaria and provide solutions and see how we can foster partnerships to actually solve the problems that we're having currently. As an alliance, we understand that innovations are critical to help the international development community achieve goals in the fight against malaria and other global health challenges. Considering the current malaria goals, the timelines we have, the challenges we have, and the new developments and opportunities, we believe that this is a great time, this is a great moment to have the discussion, especially as today is World Mosquito Day. Today's webinar, we'll try to present the progress towards malaria vaccine and current vaccine pipelines. We'll showcase new vector control tools to combat malaria, transmission and insecticide resistance. We'll talk about challenges of bringing malaria innovations to scale and opportunities for the private sector to support malaria innovations. And then we will showcase high impact initiatives and successes from employing new tools on malaria control and elimination. We have 3 experts who will be addressing this topic. After the 3 presentations, we'll have the opportunity to ask them questions. You may send in your questions via the chat panel at any time during the presentation. We will collect this and address them during the Q&A sessions at the end of today, at the end of the presentation. Please, like I said at the onset, onset of my speech, we would recommend you keep your lines muted till we get to the Q&A session. Before we proceed proper to the presentation, I would like to welcome Michael Stenberg, who is our CAMA co-chair and team lead Global Public Health and Special Projects from Chevron. Michael, over to you.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right, we'll go ahead and give this a shot and see how the connection is. So welcome and thanks for being here. Morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. It's a privilege to be here just to share a couple of remarks. As Ochuko said, I'm a co-chair and Global Public Health at Chevron. I'll try to keep this short since we've got such a good agenda today and the topic is really engaging. You know, at Chevron, we partner with GBC Health and CAMA for many, many years. Malaria and mosquito-borne illnesses have been a real health and safety focus of ours for decades, and much longer. And you think, you know, why it's important to us, many of you are in similar industries as us, but, you know, we work in a lot of these high-risk regions, and we're really committed to getting our workforce and keeping our workforce safe. We want to make sure we leave a positive impact in the communities where we operate and, you know, for current and future generations. So we've had a real strong malaria prevention and management program here. You know, includes things like training and clinic consultations. You know, we have events and personal protective equipment, and different notification systems and partnerships, like the one with CAMA, and a lot of other things as well. This year, we've actually gone through a full sort of inventory and review of all of our mosquito-borne illness-related processes, protocols, resources, tools. I worked a little bit with Chuco and CAMA. They've been helpful in providing some updates and some of that with regard to what's going on and what's new in the industry, and we'll hear about some of that today. It's been a really valuable process for us. We're making some updates and improvements, and just making sure that we're consistent across the globe with what we're doing in our tools and processes, and certainly optimizing available resources and making sure that our employees are safe. So keeping a pulse on new tools. There's some great new innovations in the pipeline, whether it's new apps or next generation nets or automating some processes, different preventive medications, more engaging tools. So again, we'll hear a little bit about that today, which will be, I think, of benefit to all of us. And a final note on sort of private sector and how we can support these efforts in the private sector. Clearly there's the financial investment, but outside of that, I mean, Chuco kind of noted a few of those. There's so many other opportunities that CAMA enables, like benchmarking and sharing best practices and learnings. Connecting us here is a great example of that. Connecting us as partners, sharing our expertise, being able to maybe pilot opportunities together in certain regions. I'm sure you can think of plenty more as well. So I'll just leave it as, I really encourage us all to continue to leverage from one another and continue to work together, well after this webinar, to try new things, get together in different ways, and just have a conversation. I'll certainly offer, I welcome contacts and outreach by anyone on this call, so feel free to send me an email anytime. So back to you, Chuco. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And so we will proceed with our first speaker, presentation from IVCC. Derek Nemo is the Senior Technical Manager at IVCC. Derek manages the IVCC technical team and portfolio, evaluating new active ingredients and innovative vector control tools. The technical team works with industry and academic partners to bring innovative and sustainable tools for vector control to the market. With 25 years experience in molecular entomology and field research in a range of insect vectors and disease, there including the technical development of innovative vector control tools, performing and leading field trials in countries, including Africa, Asia, and so part of the Americas. Derek, I'll leave this to you right now and to take over the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me okay. If you'd move to the first slide, please. Thank you. So IVCC is the only product development partnership working on vector control. We're investing in donor funds in R&D to overcome barriers in innovation in vector control. And this is mainly around LLINs, IRS, but we're also working in a lot of other innovative tools, which I'll explain a bit more about in a minute. Next slide, please. So the primary role of a product development partnership that we do is addressing market challenges. So initial costs of new nets being high, how do you address that market challenge to get them into the market faster? Scientific and product management platforms, developing these platforms, helping others to develop them so that we can bring through tools faster. And we're very much impact driven. So we do research, but we're very much on the development side to get those tools to the market as fast as possible so they can actually make a difference. We help de-risk innovation through funders' money, allowing innovators to develop tools that they normally might not have because we've got this money available to help them. And we have innovator community expert support. So we have experts from all around the world helping us to evaluate tools. And we have broad, hopefully non-political outreach into the community to help bring these tools through to them. Next slide, please. So IVCC is in a network of product development partnerships, all focused on public health. So within the malaria sphere,
Yes,
there's
baby.
MVI and PATH with vaccines. We've got IVCC and vector control and microbiocides. We've got PATH, DNDi, and medicines for malaria, ventures, therapeutics, and find. So there's a few product development partnerships in the malaria sphere, but we're the only one working on vector control. Next slide, please. So we have a strategic framework, and that is end-to-end product development with a primary focus on malaria eradication in sub-Saharan Africa. So we have three sort of platforms, if you like, or frameworks within developing, enabling, and delivering. So within developing, we work with universities, we work with companies, etc., to try and develop new public health insecticides, new IRS formulations, and just general solutions for malaria control, because a lot of malaria control is currently indoors. And we know that to get to elimination or to control, we need to look at solutions that block outdoor disease transmission as well. And we work on enabling, so building stakeholder partnerships, improving the reliability and consistency of our laboratory and field data, improved and efficiency application technology for IRS, and integrated vector management is very important, along with proper insecticide resistance management for integrated interventions, because we all know there's no single tool that's going to work out there, and we need to deliver them in a integrated approach. And then of course there's delivery, actually delivering those into the market so that they actually make a difference. I've lost the slides, my end is there. That's it. Next slide. Thank you. So insecticide resistance has reached a tipping point. I think most of us know that pyrethroid resistance is now widespread and growing. Now we're starting to get more data on pyrethroid resistance, and we know that there's many different mechanisms of pyrethroid resistance as well. There is PBO, which is a synergist, which can help to combat pyrethroid insecticide resistance, or certain types of pyrethroid insecticide resistance. But we know that's just a stopgap. So we need to have new innovative tools available to combat malaria. Next slide, please. So we urgently need new vector control tools, and currently IVCC is working on a range of tools from bed nets, IRS, we're working on different larviciding tools, space spraying tools, as well as environmental management, so modification of houses, improving houses. And then there's a whole range of other tools, from coils, vaporizing mats, aerosols, even genetically modified insects, that all could be used. So the pipeline is very rich, and the promise, but the promise is also fragile and high risk. So which of those really are going to make a difference, and which of those do we really need to bring through to the field quickly so that we can make a difference to malaria? Next slide, please. So we urgently need new vector control tools, and you can see the research pipeline on the left here. There's many different possibilities. Click again, please. Thank you. And we have a development pipeline at the moment of LLINs, long-lasting insecticide nets with novel AIs. So there's pyrethroids, there's carbamates, there's organophosphates and organochlorines, neonics, but we know that there's already resistance to those. So IVCC is working in partnership with several industry partners to develop novel active ingredients that are a different mode of action to the current insecticides, and therefore combat or hopefully combat insecticide resistance by rotating using proper insecticide resistance management. There's long-lasting IRS, so and there's actually now extra long-lasting IRS as well. So improving the longevity IRS to 6 to 8 months has been a target that's been reached, but there's also actually taken that out to 12 months, because IRS products generally are sprayed only once a year, and if they only last 6 months, they're not giving the full protection for the whole year, and that allows insecticide resistance to develop. So we're working with partners to try and improve the lifetime of the product. And then there's attractive targeted sugar baits, which I could do a whole other presentation on. If you haven't heard about it, you can ask a question at the end just because of time, but attractive target sugar baits, basically targeting the sugar feeding behavior of mosquitoes that can be used outdoors and indoors. For the sake of time, I won't go through the rest, but we've got a whole range of different product developments that we're keeping an eye on through IVCC. So this particular slide focuses on the active ingredients. So the novel active ingredients that we've been working on over the past 10 years or so. So started off with 4.5 million chemical compounds in 27 different classes, and then filtering those classes down through figuring out which ones are either don't have the right toxicology profile or don't have the right properties to be in a net or in a IRS. We went from 4.5 million, we're down to about 9 compounds now that we're continuing to take through and develop into new LLINs and new IRS products. And then beyond that, there's ATSB products as well, which can involve a whole new class of AIs because these are ingestible insecticides. Next slide, please. So we rely on partnerships to meet our goals. IVCC is a small team, but we work with a lot of different partners. I don't know whether you can actually see all the different partners down there, but we work with funding, academia, innovators, companies. We have lots of lab and field trial sites, and we have implementation programs and international organizations that we work with, like WHO, to help to take these tools from development all the way through to market. Next slide, please. So a recent initiative that we've been working on with industry partners is 0 by 40. And this is a unique platform for a new dialogue in vector control and public health. And the declaration for vector control starts a new partnership between the leaders in crop protection, IVCC, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and a wide range of other funding partners and stakeholders who are driving towards a world free of malaria. So this is an opportunity for all the companies to get together to have one goal, and that is to get malaria down to 0 by 2040. Now, there's been a lot of initiatives like this in the past, but this is actually with the companies that are developing the tools to control malaria. And this is for them to work together to help to achieve that goal. And that's what makes this unique. Next slide, please. So the CEOs of these 5 different companies, BASF, Bayer, Mitsui, Sumitomo, and Syngenta, have signed a declaration of commitment to 0 by 40 in 2018 at Davos, and remain committed to that. And we were working with those partners at the moment to see what we can develop out of that 0 by 40 initiative. Next slide, please. So, so this is just a couple of pictures from Davos showing us engaging industry partners at the World Economic Forum. Next slide, please. And so one of the big projects we have in Africa is to increase capacity building. And so we have worked with 7 different sites in Africa to help them get to GLP site accreditation. And this is so that firstly, they can obviously perform studies to better standards. And it's also so that they can then become self-sufficient and be able to evaluate new tools themselves in country with the confidence that they're doing the research in the right way and to a GLP standard. It also allows them to be able to work with industry partners to test new products independently. So even though IVCC has funded this, they will move forwards as independent sites that can bring in their own money and their own income to then expand and evaluate new products. Thank you. Next slide, please. So this is just a slide to sort of illustrate the sort of development, launch, uptake, and optimal coverage. So from bench to impact, we call this access to delivery. So this is a PDP. We start off with target product profiles and access agreements so that we know exactly what we're trying to develop and what properties we want from it. We go through a development stage where we develop the product, go through the regulatory process with EPA or the WHO or UPQ to assess safety and efficacy. And then you launch the product into the market, and then you've obviously got uptake of that product and all the capacity building and all the help through engineers, which I'm going to talk about in the next slide. Go to the next slide, please. So engineers is a market shaping innovation. Engineers stands for Next Generation IRS. And it was put together to accelerate the uptake of third generation IRS products. And so it was working with implementing partners to procure 1.1 million additional units of, at the time, Actelic 300 CS, to then uptake an additional 1.2 million bottles, so that these could then be used in different places in Africa to help combat malaria. New quality assured products from several manufacturers are now available on the market, and these products are available at a reduced price. And this was through volume discount negotiations through engineers. And this has helped to increase the uptake of IRS over the past 3 years, I think, after a long period of reduction in the uptake of IRS. I think I've finished that slide. Yes, next slide, please. So there's hope and risk. So Bill Gates said eradicating malaria is not a vague, unrealistic aspiration, but a tough, ambitious goal that can be reached within the next few decades. That was back in 2011. There was a global plan for insecticide resistance management, GPA, that mentioned that if nothing is done and insecticide resistance leads to widespread failure of pyrethroids, the public health consequences would be devastating. And we're reaching that point now. And so we need to maintain the gains, maintain the gains over the past decade or so, and keep that curve going down towards zero. And to do that, we need to invest in products, we need to invest in innovation, and we need to invest in getting products to the market so they can actually make a difference. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you, Derek. That was very insightful. I want to reiterate to all you can keep your questions coming via the chat panel. Like I said, at the end, the Q&A session, we will have we'll address those questions. So we will move on to our next speaker, Dr. Ashley Burkett. Is a director, PATH Malaria Vaccine Initiative. Dr. Ashley leads PATH Malaria Vaccine Initiative, which accelerates the development of malaria vaccines and catalyzes timely access in endemic countries. He has more than 20 years of vaccine development experience. Prior to joining PATH, Dr. Burkett spent 12 years in the vaccine technology industry, where he led the advancement of novel influenza and malaria vaccine candidates from research through first-in-human clinical studies. Dr. Burkett earned a doctor of philosophy in biochemistry and molecular biophysics, and he has applied biological science from the University of West England. Dr. Ashley, thank you for joining us, and over to you.
Thank you. Good morning. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I'm going to speak with you about an important scientific breakthrough in the development of new tools against malaria, and specifically the world's first malaria vaccine, which is advancing now into a pilot study in a million children in 3 African countries. The vaccine I'm going to talk about is the RTSS vaccine, also known as Mosquirix. It's the first vaccine proven effective in reducing malaria in sub-Saharan Africa, whereas I think we're all aware the disease, despite the progress that we've made, continues to kill a child every 2 minutes. We go to the next slide, please. So I work for an organization called PATH. Just a little bit of background on who PATH is. We are a leader in global health innovation. International nonprofit organization that creates breakthroughs towards health solutions with global impact. We accelerate innovation across 5 different platforms, those being vaccines, drugs, diagnostics devices, and systems and service innovation. And this really fuels our passion and desire for health equity globally. We really specialize in navigating the hurdles that keep solutions from reaching the people that need them most. And we don't do this alone. We do this in partnership. We mobilize literally thousands of partners across sectors, borders and disciplines to really ensure that the tools that we develop are available to transform the lives of those that need them most. If we go to the next slide. So just a little bit background on where we are. Of course, we've made a lot of progress in the first 15 years of this century in terms of reducing particularly mortality from malaria. What I show on this slide here is the Global Technical Strategy goals published by WHO a few years ago. 4 primary goals, the first 2 associated with reductions in mortality and morbidity compared to 2015 levels, and then the 3rd and 4th goals associated with elimination and prevention of re-establishment. And I think really what's most important here on the first 2 points is that we're already behind in terms of trying to reduce by 40% the morbidity and mortality globally from 2015 levels. And the concern being it's going to be very difficult to catch up. And while we're currently on track with elimination targets, if we're not able to sort of course correct with the morbidity and mortality reduction targets, then these are going to have a knock-on effect relative to long-term goals around regional elimination. So there's really two strategies that have been undertaken to get things back on track. One is to use existing tools in a more targeted, in a smarter way. We don't have a lot more resources to use, so we really have to work in a more targeted way with the tools we have. But as was mentioned by the previous speaker, the importance of introducing new transformative tools is also going to be a key aspect. And today, I'm going to speak with you about a vaccine that could have a significant impact in both global goals, burden reduction as well as accelerating elimination. So if we go to the next slide, we often think of vaccines as sort of a single source solution against infectious diseases, and they've filled that role in many diseases throughout history. But I think for malaria, it's very important we think differently about vaccines. They are not the silver bullet that are going to replace the other interventions. It's critical that we think about vaccines as a complementary tool that can build on top of the progress that's been made with other tools, such as drugs and bed nets and rapid diagnostics and the like. And so really that's where we position vaccines. Developing vaccines against malaria is extremely challenging. There's a lot of reasons why it's different from a typical bacterial or viral vaccine. But we also face the challenge that there's no dual market for a malaria vaccine. This is a vaccine for the poorest of the poor, and so really not a high profit driver or a profit driver at all, really, to entice commercial interest. So it really falls on the public sector to shoulder the burden in terms of developing vaccines. We know that natural immunity is not the answer. While you can acquire natural immunity through repeated exposures, we know that's not enough to recapitulate that through vaccination and have the type of effects that we're seeking. And it's a very complex organism with a complex life cycle that's constantly changing and really gives us additional challenges in terms of vaccine development. So This is why it's taken so long to get to where we are today, but we have our first success, and I'm excited to report that to you over the next few slides. So just to re-emphasize on the next slide, the importance of really maintaining an integrated approach against malaria. This just summarizes some of the tools that we have at our disposal today, and just some high-level numbers in terms of the impact that they have. Obviously, insecticide-treated nets have been the bedrock of malaria control for many decades now, and I think will continue to be so for the foreseeable future. Indoor residual spraying can also have a positive impact, and we're seeing seasonal malaria chemo prevention, particularly in young children, also looking like a particularly promising new tool. And overall, through the first 15 years of the century, about 68% of the reductions in malaria were accounted to by the role of ITNs. So really important that we not ignore the important contribution that these tools have made. They're going to have an important contribution going forward, but can a vaccine be a supplemental tool that we bring on top of the existing tools that we have? So if we go to the next slide, the RTSS vaccine is certainly now a proven tool in terms of vaccine efficacy. It was the subject of a large phase 3 study involving over 15,000 young African children in 7 countries in sub-Saharan Africa. Through this large clinical trial, it was shown that the vaccine prevents 4 in 10 cases of clinical malaria, about a 30% reduction in cases of severe malaria. There's a lot of focus on those endpoints, but there's also some supplemental endpoints which are actually quite impactful as well. 60% reduction in severe malaria anemia, and 40% reduction in malaria hospitalization associated with the vaccine. So it can have important supplemental benefits beyond just prevention of clinical malaria. We've also, in partnership with the manufacturer, GlaxoSmithKline, reported just in the last few months the positive effect of this vaccine over a period of 7 years at several of the sites which were participated in the phase 3 study. So if we go to the next slide, the phase 3 trial was performed in the context of an artificially good standard of care. Very few deaths relatively during the course of the phase 3 trial. And this is makes sort of assessment of the tool in terms of its real world impact quite challenging. We saw that the vaccine could prevent over 6,000 cases of malaria for every 1,000 children vaccinated in the highest burden settings. But as I said, relatively few cases of severe malaria and relatively few deaths because of the artificially good standard of care that the children enjoyed through the phase 3 trial. So we've relied on modeling to try to get a sense of what could be the actual impact of the vaccine when or if it's rolled out in a real world setting. And 4 modeling groups were actually working on this, and through a WHO coordinated process, those 4 groups actually came together, a little bit of an unprecedented effort to bring those groups together to really start to bring together some consensus estimates of the impact and cost effectiveness potential for this vaccine. And the general consensus that came out was that if the vaccine was to be implemented in moderate to high transmission settings where it can have the most public health impact, for every 200 children vaccinated, we'd expect about 233 malaria cases averted and 1 death averted. And it's going to be through the malaria vaccine introduction project, or the pilot introduction that WHO is leading, that I'll talk a little bit about, is focused on this type of setting, and is going to generate the real world data that's going to be important as we move through the policy process with WHO. Go to the next slide, please. Cost effectiveness is critical. We're in a situation where there are not new resources coming to the table in terms of implementing the tools that we have. So we really have to be smarter about how we use the resources we have, and we have to bring competitive technologies to bear in terms of cost effectiveness. And this is a published report from a few years ago now, but just basically to show that the RTSS vaccine at a projected dose of $5 per dose, the vaccine currently is administered as a 4-dose immunization regimen. It is viewed as being cost effective with respect to other malaria control tools that are currently being widely implemented. If we go to the next slide. So where are we now? The malaria vaccine implementation program that I mentioned is a WHO coordinated effort. This really builds on two important events that happened around the 2015 period. First of all, the European Medicines Agency, considered a gold standard or a stringent regulatory agency, gave the green light to RTSS in July 2015. Based on a regulatory assessment in terms of safety, efficacy, and manufacturability. And then later that year, in 2015, WHO performed their initial policy assessment, and the decision was made to advance the vaccine through a pilot introduction program. And through a competitive process, 3 countries were identified: Kenya, Ghana, and Malawi. And the pilot introduction will call for about 120,000 children per country per year to be vaccinated through their standard immunization program. So this is not a trial, this is an introduction and a pilot evaluation of the vaccine in a real world setting. So as we are working with WHO on the pilot introduction, it's extremely important that we continue to message around the importance of maintaining the current tools that have got us to where we are today in terms of advancements in malaria. And so that's really important in the communication messages we show here. Also the importance of the 4-dose regimen that the vaccine is currently implemented in this. So these communication tools are extremely important, particularly given the sort of the preconceived suggestions that once you get vaccinated with a vaccine, you don't have to worry about getting that infectious agent. That is really not the case with malaria. And so it's extremely important that we communicate appropriately in that regard. And we've put a lot of time and effort into that with our partners. On to the next slide. I think this is an important slide because it shows really a unique opportunity that we have with immunization that we can potentially leverage with the RTSS vaccine. And really what this slide shows is the global coverage of different health interventions. And if you could just focus on the green line, which is immunization as represented by DTP3 immunization, which is about 80 to 90% globally, including in many of the areas that we're targeting in sub-Saharan Africa. And then contrast that with some of the challenges that we face getting full coverage for tools like insecticide-treated nets. And so I think this opportunity for bridging the gap and these communities where it's maybe more difficult to implement tools like ITNs could be a real opportunity for leveraging an existing immunization system. If you go to the next slide, just to give you a little bit more information on the implementation pilot program that's ongoing, it's really going to generate 3 key sets of data over about a 4-year period, but an interim data point at 24 months with safety data primarily, as well as impact data and feasibility of delivering the required 4 doses. At around 2021, so 24 months after the start of the pilot, which started earlier this year, the data should be in place to enable WHO to have an initial policy recommendation, particularly to show whether concerns regarding safety signals and the trends around severe malaria and mortality are as expected. And then at the end of the pilot introduction at around 2023, a follow-up assessment based on all of the data that's available at that point. So the final slide that I just wanted to walk through quickly is sort of how all of this comes together in terms of the RTSS vaccine. I've talked about the pilot and the data being collected over the next 4 years or so, the policy decisions I've talked about. It's important that we have funding gaps. The pilot is an extremely complex and expensive undertaking that has required new donors to step up and help to support this, and we're grateful to the support from the donors that's showed here. But I think the key point I want to make on this slide is if you look at sort of the demand and supply, it creates some real challenges in terms of maintaining a continuous supply of a vaccine when you have a very long period of uncertainty that's associated with something such as a pilot introduction that we're facing here. And you can see that once the original recommendation for the pilots happened in end of 2015 and 2016, the vaccine was no longer being produced. And now we face production with uncertainty about the long-term demand and the financing for the vaccine. So it's really critical that all of these tie together to provide a sustainable platform for the continued manufacture of the vaccine if it's desired by the community as a tool going forward. So with that, I will close on the final slide and just emphasize it's really all about partnership. This highlights some of the key partners that we've been working closely with over the last almost 20 years on RTSS, and just like to flag the role of WHO leading the pilot introduction, GSK, the manufacturer of this vaccine that we've worked with for over 20 years, the African countries that we've worked so closely with on evaluation of the vaccine, and just recognize the role of USAID on some work that we did on the decision-making framework to enable countries to make informed decisions around whether to introduce the RTSS vaccine, and then finally ExxonMobil for their work, particularly around communications work, which has been critically important as we leverage that work as part of the pilot introduction. And finally, the support of the Gates Foundation for this program. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Ashley. That was a very robust presentation. So moving on to our next presentation, we're coming from Dr. Malik Diarra. Dr. Malik Diarra joined ExxonMobil in 2009 with over 20 years of experience in international health and development. He is the public health manager of ExxonMobil Department of Medicine and Occupational Health based in Houston, Texas. He's trained as a physician at Dakar School of Medicine in Senegal with an MBA from Paris and an MPH from Tulane University, New Orleans. Dr. Malik, the platform is all yours for your presentation. Okay, seems like we lost Dr. Malik for a bit. Dr. Malik, please, if you can hear me, please try to call in or let us know if you're having issues with your network. Okay, so in the meantime, while we wait for him to join in, we will start taking questions for the other two speakers that just presented. So if you have questions based on what they talked about on vaccine and vector control technologies and all of that, please feel free to send your questions on the chat panel. And if you want to speak directly to the speakers, feel free to unmute yourself and render your questions. We can start taking questions right now while we wait for Dr. Malik to join in. Okay, I think I'll kickstart the question session. So let me start with Dr. Ashley. You spoke very well about the RTSS children vaccine. We would like to know what else is on the horizon in the malaria vaccine development field. Like, are there other vaccine that is on the pipeline that we should know about? I would appreciate if you throw a light on that.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So, thank you. RTSS is certainly the most advanced vaccine in development, and the only one that to date has shown efficacy against clinical malaria in a large field study, including the phase 3 trial. There is a rich pipeline of other vaccines in development, but I would say that we're looking at probably 8 to 10 years away from any next generation vaccine. And I think that one of the key challenges that we still haven't really cracked in terms of malaria vaccine development is around durability of protection and the ability to induce, 3 to 5 years of protection with a typical, say, 2 or 3 dose vaccine regimen. We're still looking at vaccines that are probably going to require annual boosting, and there's really nothing on the horizon that's going to move the needle. So it's really back to a lot of the basics of understanding the biology of the parasite so that we can inform next generation vaccine efforts that can really improve markedly on what we have with the current RTSS vaccine, and we're clearly not there at this point.
Hello. This is Mike.
Oh, Dr. Marlake, you're back. Can you hear us? Can you hear me?
Thank you. Yes.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ashley, for that. We'll get back to you with more questions. Thank you. So, Dr. Malik, yes, I hope you heard me when I introduced you. We would like to, yes. So we would like to have your presentation right away. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, and Michael. And I would also like to thank Jim Jones, who is our community investment manager, who provided this opportunity to share how and why we work in malaria in general. I can't see the deck, but I would say if we go to the first slide of the deck showing the map where we operate, it's really indicating why we are in malaria for ExxonMobil, and it's mainly a key part of our business because of our business approach, because we are both looking at how to protect our workers that are traveling from across the globe to go to the different locations where we can have malaria risk, and it's important to protect them. And at the same time, it's very important to have healthy communities to operate and develop our business in the different locations. This map is indicating where we are working, and there are different aspects of our work that can be related to how to develop resources or distribute oil and gas. And you can have more information on these aspects in the annual report that you can access through the link indicated at the bottom. And I was also saying while I was on mute, or maybe not able to talk to everyone, that I feel really at home talking over the phone from here, because I'm having worked for 20 years with different groups, NGOs, USAID. I certainly have a number of former colleagues, partners, in addition to those I have now on the phone. Just to say that people are always asking me, what are you doing in ExxonMobil and why are you there? So I'm just saying I'm doing the same thing, protecting the people from infectious diseases and malaria, and looking at both the workplaces and working with our public and government affairs and the foundation in terms of how to protect the communities from malaria. And from a workplace perspective, if you look at the second slide, we have 5 corporate programs from malaria, TB outbreaks, vector-borne diseases, and 3 sets of measures for prevention and 3 for response. And all that is to prevent health issues for our workers, ensure continued productivity, have the ability to operate, and protect our reputation. And this is the part related to the prevention. We use the ABCD to protect our workers, and the A is related to awareness. The B is what was presented by IVCC in terms of bite prevention and how to prevent mosquito bites in our settings and for workers that are operating outdoor. We use the different measures that are recommended in addition to using impregnated clothing. But the most important piece that I will elaborate on, and that is circled in red, is the prevention and the use of drugs, chemoprophylaxis for the non-immunes, to prevent cases, fatalities, and all the consequences that are indicated here. And at the top of the slide, you can see that we use a systematic approach that is integrated into our safety processes and systems to identify the risk and implement the measures in a fit-for-risk perspective. And the uniqueness of our program in terms of how we've been able to be successful, which will be the last slide, is the use of testing to confirm how chemoprophylaxis is really in place for the travelers and the expatriates that are located in the at-risk locations. Knowing that the other components, meaning the awareness, the bite prevention, and the early diagnostic and treatment are made available to all our employees, dependents across the globe where we have the risk, including the travelers. If we are on the next slide, presenting the innovative biotechnology, it's a rapid test that has been developed with the French Army and other biotechnology companies to detect within 10 minutes if our travelers, non-immunes or expats in country are using their chemoprophylaxis. And I have to say that we faced very, very serious situations in the past for those employees and even contractors who got serious, I would say, cases of malaria. But with the implementation of this device, we can see on the last slide how effective has been our program with improved compliance for chemoprophylaxis, protecting the expats, rotators, and people coming from overseas to the at-risk locations. We did not have malaria deaths since 2007, and we know that a number of other organizations can face these situations. And we got more than 2,000 non-immune malaria cases averted. And that means that around the early 2000s, we got more than 200 malaria cases among non-immunes. We also count the cases among our nationals, and depending on the locations, we have different intensity and morbidity for these locations. But we also count for the non-immunes, the expats, and how we control and prevent the malaria with such population. The partnerships that we have developed with the French Army help us develop the testing for doxycycline, progranil, and mefloquine that are the chemoprophylaxis medicines used to prevent malaria. This is provided to everyone who is at risk and non-immune, including the dependent and the contractors. And all these tests have been rolled out where we have operations and malaria risk. And in some years, we can go to 10 to 15,000 tests done in a year. And the use of these tests also help us save lab costs, because in the past, the tests that were performed, the samples were sent back to one specific location. And from a cost of $80 per test, we went down to $10 per test. So that's in a nutshell the innovation I wanted to share with the group. It's certainly slightly different from what we can see in the general population, but for corporations that are sending expatriates, non-immunes in at-risk locations, it's very important to see how best we can protect these workers while also contributing to community investments to protect the communities. I will stop there because I can see that we are close to the time, and revert back to Choku for the rest of the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Malik. That was very impressive. That was a very impressive program. I'm sure a lot of us have learned from that. We have a couple of questions from the audience already. So I'll take, starting with questions to Derek. Question 1, are we on track with pipeline of new product development? What are the risks that we face in product development? And then question 3, how can non-commodity companies best support malaria elimination goals? I know you talked about the 040 initiative. Aside from malaria commodity companies, how can others that are non-manufacturers actually support some of these initiatives that you're doing?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, I can hear you.
Great, thank you. Good question. Thank you. Good question. So in terms of active ingredient development, we are on track. We have several new active ingredients that should be through phase 2, phase 3 testing in the next 2 to 3 years. Of course, they can all fail at different points, which applies to the next question, really, in that there's a lot of risks in developing new active ingredients all the way through from early screening through to screening for toxicology, screening for different properties that make it applicable to different products. And then, of course, there's the field testing, checking that it actually works in the field and you can replicate the lab results. And then there's market access. A lot of these new active ingredients are more expensive because they are new. You haven't got the facilities to increase production until you've really got into the market. So they're all going to be more expensive. So there's a lot of challenges there and a lot of risks. In terms of sort of smaller companies, if you can work with that term, I think there's 0x40 initiative is not just about the big companies, the big producers of active ingredients, NETs and IRS. I believe it is very much open to others, and the whole point about it is to bring them together, to work together towards malaria elimination. And so if there are other companies or other innovators out there, they can approach IVCC or 0x40 to look at their products or their innovations and see if they fit into the product pipeline or the target product profiles that we're thinking about for malaria control with vector control tools. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. Thank you, Derek. I know we are probably approaching time.
Yes,
so I have one question for Dr. Ashley. Yes, and one question for Dr. Malik. So let's start with Dr. Ashley. Are we on track with pipeline? Okay, that's the question for Derek, which I just stated. Okay, what needs to happen to ensure that there are adequate levels of vaccine to support new countries that want to introduce the vaccine in their countries? I think this is a very valid question because I have been having calls from different partners wanting to know more about the RTSS and how they can actually scale or get the vaccine used in countries. And so I think we would like to know more about this, if you can actually respond to this question. Dr. Ashley?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first step is really going through the pilot implementation program that's currently underway in 3 countries. That's really going to generate the evidence for WHO regarding their policy recommendation, which is obviously a critical step. But I think to your point is, planning for success and ensuring that we have vaccine available if it receives a sufficiently positive policy recommendation and countries want to take on the vaccine. it's a real challenge. And I think I highlighted that, the support for production of the vaccine over the last several years really there's been gaps, and I think resource mobilization efforts are underway to help to support the supply, and also to really get the best sense possible of what the likely demand is going to be. A vaccine takes many years to scale up production. It's not just like a faucet where you can turn it on and off. If you want to scale up and have more vaccine doses available, you have to plan for that. And it really can take, 5 or 6 years in terms of planning to scale. But aligning that policy recommendation with that's going to come from WHO with the financing to ensure that that's going to be in place to support the vaccine if it is introduced, but then also to make sure that we can bridge through these periods of uncertainty where we have a very limited requirement for the vaccine for the next several years. 1 million doses over the next 4 years or so is a fairly modest demand. But then if we want to really rapidly ramp up to 50 or 100 million doses, there has to be investment for that. And I think that's really a critical piece of our work going forward, is to ensure that we have that financial support and line of sight to get us there.
Okay. Thank you for that, Dr. Ashley. So I have 2 questions for Dr. Malik. First, what kind of challenges do you face in keeping your travelers, employees compliant in taking their prevention medication and staying safe and healthy? Question 2, what do companies need to consider when assessing and monitoring malaria and workforce and community programs? Can you share some of the lessons you've learned across countries? Dr. Malik, are you there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All
right. For the first question, the challenges that we are facing are mainly related to how spread are our different operations. So it's across the globe from Asia Pacific to West Africa, and how to make sure that people are having the right information, the available products, and how the verification is possible at the different locations. But I have to say that we've been pretty successful in ensuring that part, and now we are looking at how to better tailor and scale the measures. So depending on the risk, we scale the measures and the protective prevention measures. And we just went through a full review from the medical, safety, and the business lines, because we have a support from the executives of the company to implement that. And we are looking at that, really how to make fit for purpose measures. And it's pretty working well, I would say. And the lessons learned, I think one is communication. 2 is to have a clear, practical, and acceptable measures across. And the top one for me is how to gain the engagement of the business line, the executive of the company, to invest in the measures that can optimally protect the workers, the dependent, and the contractors, and see how we can invest in the communities to also have an impact on both sides. Very quickly, that's what I can share with you. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. I wish we had more time. We still have lots of questions coming in. So what I would say is to the audience, if you feel free to send me more questions via email. I will collate your questions and send it to the speakers, whoever it's addressed to, and I will get the responses and send back to you. Dr. Malik, I have a couple of questions for you, so I will send them to you after the call, and hopefully we'll get your response and send back to everybody. We're out of time. I apologize for that, but we will have to draw up the curtain here. First off, there's a lot of highlights that has been said so far, a lot of key points that key takeaways that we can actually draw from the presentation. I'm trying to scroll through my slide. One of the key line that actually got me was the quote from Bill Gates: "Eradicating malaria is not a vague, unrealistic aspiration, but a tough, ambitious goal that can be reached within the next few decades." We all know that mosquito-borne disease, malaria alone accounting for over 400 of these diseases. From what Ashley said, he said no one approach is going to end malaria. Of the multiple challenges we have, we need new multiple complementary tools and strategies to accelerate the fight and further drive down the malaria disease burden. We need partnerships. No one stakeholder can do it alone. We need funding. We need support. We need to work together to ensure that we get to a desired goal. I know it's a bit tasking, but we can do it, and that's why we're having these conversations. I believe that we've all learned from one or two things today that we can actually take away to enhance our programs, be it from the workplace or to the communities where we work. And the conversation is not going to end here. We will continue to have this conversation. Like I said, online, we will keep talking. Thank you to all our speakers, and thank you to everyone for attending today's webinar. On behalf of GBC Health Corporate Alliance on Malaria in Africa, I want to say thank you and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.